Badlands of Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
We were sleeping. I've been sleeping. I've been turning away from a truth I wanted not to face. There is a wound that won't heal at the center of the galaxy. There is a darkness reaching like rust into everything around us. We let it grow, and now it's here.
How many men have you killed, Malone?
I don't know.
50? 100? Countless.
Countless has a nice ring to it.
And how many lives have you saved?
500,000. Population of King's Landing. Tell me if your precious Randy commanded you to kill your own father and stand by while thousands of men, women, and children burned alive, would you have done it? Would you have kept your oath then?
Our time has come. We prepared. We grew stronger. While you rested in your cradle of power, you were trusted to lead the Republic. But you were deceived. You assumed no force could challenge you. And now, finally, we have returned.
The visions are clear now. I see possible futures all at once. Our enemies are all around us. And in so many futures they prevail. But I do see a way. There is a narrow way through. It's not a prophecy. It's a story that you keep telling, but it's not their story, it's yours. They deserve to be led by one of their own. What your people did to this world is heartbreaking.
We gave them something to hope for.
That's not hope!
We have survived by hiding from them, by running from them. But they are the gatekeepers. They are guarding all the doors, they are holding all the keys, which means that sooner or later, someone is going to have to fight them.
I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such time, but that is not for them to decide. All we will have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us.
Forgive me. I did not see. I have failed you all.
You will bring me. Captain Armor, I do not know what strength is like that. But I swear to you, I will not let the White City fall. Our people fail. Our people. Our people.
I wish you good fortune in the wars to come. And now it begins.
No. Now it ends.
All right, people. Welcome to The Narrative, episode 16, Consensus Protocols. And if the last 2 weeks were any lesson for me, it is that I name these episodes in advance to try to make myself stick to some sort of topic. I'm still working on it, but we'll see if we do on this episode. But, you know, freeform's kind of my thing. Bit of a weird mood tonight. Learned something pretty messed up about my significant other. We're going to work through it. But, you know, you guys are kind of my therapists, like this audience. And my wife and I, Mrs. Bright, you may know her as, we've been watching Cobra Kai for years together. It's a good show. It's a guilty pleasure. Karate stuff, right? Like, we can all get into it. We finished the show this week. And I learned toward the end of the show that she's never seen The Karate Kid. It's like, what were we even doing this whole time? Watching Cobra Kai. I mean, So we're trying to rectify that. Karate Kid is on the calendar. We started watching it tonight. We didn't finish it, but, that's what's going on in my corner. But that's not what it's about tonight. What it's about tonight is figuring out every problem this country has ever had and solving all of those problems in a conversation within about 60 to unlimited minutes. We'll see where it goes. Before we get into tonight's topic and my guest, going to hit you with a sponsor, and that is our good friend, the Pillow Savage, Mike Lindell.
I hear every day about the products you all wish MyPillow carried. Well, guess what? We probably do. Slippers, bathrobes, pet beds, blankets, mattresses, sleepwear, loungewear, duvets, comforters, pot holders, aprons, oven mitts, and so much more. And they're all on sale. For example, get our best-selling standard MyPillows for only $14.98. Body pillows, $29.98. 6-piece bath towels or kitchen towel sets, just $29.98. Multi-use MyPillow 2.0s with pillowcase, $9.98. Save $40 on our Spring Percale and Giza Dream bedsheet sets. Any size, any color, and so much more. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save up to 80% on all MyPillow products. And I've never done this before. When you spend $100 or more, you're going to get 2 standard MyPillows absolutely free.
All right, Mike Lindell. It's not the commercial where he interrupts himself. That is the ultimate Mike Lindell commercial. I get disappointed every time, just like all of you do, when that's not the one. But, it is what it is. I guess it would wear out its welcome. I'm glad to see that Chad is as disturbed by that revelation about Mrs. Bright as I am. But that's not what this is about. I'm going to try not to make this episode about the Karate Kid, unless my guest is also a Karate Kid enthusiast, in which case we can just make this a Karate Kid episode. My guest tonight is a guy I've orbited around, and my friends know him. I don't think we've met in person. I think we've, passed by each other on streams, but we've never actually spoken, really, as human beings on digital streams. And that is Captain Seth Keschel. He's going to figure everything out tonight with us. So welcome to the show, Captain Seth.
Well, Mr. Bright, I've also got something in common with Mrs. Bright, and I have never seen The Karate Kid either. And I'm an 80s kid, so...
You're an 80s kid.
I was born in the 80s. I'm a 90s kid, but I was born in the 80s, yes.
Now, was it like a conscious choice that you were trying to be cool to not see The Karate Kid? Or is this some kind of just disturbing backstory?
It's just one of those things where you're supposed to have seen it, and by the time you reach the age where you feel like you're supposed to have seen it, everybody else has seen it, you're too embarrassed to admit you don't see it, haven't seen it, so you just don't. Okay. It's just kind of like when you, maybe 10 years ago when everybody had a selfie stick, and you're wondering why you don't have a selfie stick. You're wondering why that thing wound up never getting one. And then, unfortunately, they actually went out of style, which I'm not sure why they went out of style because there's still a market to be able to get that photo away from you. But I never saw it. But I've seen most of the other stuff. I was a big 80s and 90s pro wrestling fan. So Absolute Truth and I, we talk in terms of finishing moves and what entrance music when I would come out to one of his events and clothesline him off the stage. So,
yeah, man, it's pretty well. Now the chat can judge you for that too, if they will. I mean, that's their prerogative, right? This is a free market of ideas.
I've had people say a lot of really nasty things about me in the last 4 years. I think if if they want to judge me for not seeing The Karate Kid, that's fine. I'm not good at karate anyway, even though I can throw a Hadouken.
In fact, there's a lot of things we do get judged on in the so-called info war. Not seeing The Karate Kid is something I'll give people a break on. Like, if you want to judge me on that, I understand your terms. But the body doubles thing and, feds and all that kind of stuff, that's where it gets a little squirrely.
There's people that swear I've got a body double.
Yeah.
That's a little bit out there.
For those who don't know, Captain Seth Keschel is quite tall. So as we were discussing before the show, body doubles are pretty expensive. It depends on the proportions, etc. So that somebody would have to invest some serious money. And now that a lot of that money's drying up, chances are lower you're going to see Seth Keschel body doubles out there.
Yeah, but you never know. And that's the thing is you can't disprove it. That's one of the problems with so many of the accusations that flies. You can never disprove these things.
Right. So this show is called The Narrative. Obviously, you've been on Badlands before. You've spoken to the guys. I know you talked to Absolute. You talked to Chris. You talked to the Heraldian one. Unfortunately, at times we all have to suffer through him at times. So this show is where I get the excuse to do what I already do on the other shows, except it makes sense on this show, which is I sort of gave up trying to figure out what was actually going on in the info war because it's really hard, right? Kind of to our joking leading into this. So I like talking about narrative warfare. I like talking about stories because whether you think the stories, the narratives are true, false, somewhere in between, I think we all understand at this point in time that to some degree, control over the narrative battle space, control over the storytelling of these deployments has a massive impact on the actual reality that we're all experiencing, right? Like there's real stuff happening. It's very difficult sometimes to figure out what is or isn't happening, who is or isn't lying, which is why I like focusing on what are they saying? Can we glimpse any first principles in what they're saying? And, you're known a lot in this community for your work around elections, your own narrative deployments around elections and research. I want to get to that. But before I get to that, I know I don't have you for too long tonight. I just want to talk to you about, wherever you want to take it. We're at the advent of Trump 2.0. We kind of all in this audience in various ways feel like we were run through the ringer in the last 4 years, especially people who were in the public eye like you were. I'm wondering what you think about the first few months of Trump 2.0, not really from a policy perspective or things that are actually being deployed, but the story of the administration, the story of what stories the administration and Trump 2.0 kind of telling to the American people from your perspective, and how do you think that story is hitting the American mind, right? Like that could be Trump supporters, that could be the people that hate us.
Let me work my way up that mountain there. When I think about the experience of the last 4 years, there are a lot of opinions out there. There's a lot of narratives. Positive narratives on our side, not the ones the media spin. Mm-hmm. But one of your colleagues, Chris Paul, I've always mentioned that Chris is like the psychotherapist with a red couch, an extra long red couch for me. And every now and again in my brain, numbers, stats, election stuff, data, geography get slammed together in such a violent way that I have to have an outlet to be able to dump this stuff off. Because I'm telling you, this is telling me this, this is telling me this, this is telling me this, but I'm seeing this over here. And something dawned on me with Chris, specifically in fall of last year, about these narratives. And it became very clear to me, and I of course, this is stuff in hindsight to be true, but everything that is going to be attempted, at least for now, everything that is going to be attempted by folks who want to take this country over. It's not just elections. That's one aspect by which a country is conquered. But the folks who want to take this country over first precede fraud with a narrative, right? So if you're going to sell me that we should expect a certain election result, then you're going to feed it to me beforehand. So Bloomberg Magazine in 2020, before the stolen election, before I ever knew that I was going to be out there traveling around for years, before I ever knew President Trump was going to mention me, Bloomberg Magazine was like, look, expect this thing called a red mirage. All the states are going to look like they're going for Trump. And then over the course of days, because of the mail-in ballots, are going to change. And sure enough, it all changed. It all flipped out in 2020. And of course, we know what happened then. And I was confused because as a purist, an election purist, I will tell you early voting is bad. Hey, it's not good. Mail-in voting is not good. So everybody's watching President Trump in the summer and fall of 2024. And they're like, why is he pushing mail-in voting? Why is he pushing early voting? And all of a sudden it dawned on me. I mean, it was like I just saw a vision from God. And it was like, I know exactly what's going on. And I called Chris Paul and we talked this out. And the reason President Trump promoted early voting and mail-in voting, despite it not being a best practice, in fact, they're major conductors of the election fraud picture. is because at that time it was the perfect play to oppose the media narrative. Because here's what the narrative would have been. All right, if the Democrats would have had their standard early vote and mail machine out with all the Republicans waiting for election day, then you would have nothing but party breakdowns of Harris is up by this much in Arizona. Harris is close in Florida. Harris is doing this in Pennsylvania. And that would allow the narrative that she is likely to win to sink in. And this is why people try to tank the election betting markets with fake polls of Iowa right before. Right. And it wasn't to throw Iowa, it was to throw Wisconsin and set the conditions that Wisconsin should go to Harris. So narratives are an important thing. And one thing that everybody needs to understand is that we have, just like in a golf bag, you've got a driver, you've got an iron, you've got multiple irons, multiple woods, you've got a putter, you've got a sand wedge. Like, all these clubs are made to do different things. So everybody in the information battle space, first off, you have to figure out if they're credible or not credible. You're going to have people that sling mud from all directions, but ultimately, if you give yourself enough time, you're going to have a track record. You can look back through everything I have because it's in writing. Right? Very rarely am I on Substack pulling something down that I've written that was stupid. My dad would say it sounds like something that a boy with a paper ass would say, right? So I don't have that issue anymore. But narratives are important. Now, how do I think the Trump administration is shaping up now, just as the story goes? Look, I think that you have to figure out whether you look at the world in a short-term lens or a long-term lens.
Yeah.
We tend to be short-term, especially now that the Trump administration is limited to 4 years in office. Unless something changes, there's a lot of rumblings about that. But eventually he's going to pass the torch to someone else. And you have to figure out whether you want to be in a short-term or long-term approach. And the long-term mindset allows you to survive a whole lot more. Because, next week, I'm just telling you, it is very likely the Democrat is going to win the Wisconsin Supreme Court race. I'm just telling you right now. And if it is, those of you listening at home right now, you might want to spend a little bit less time on social media because it's going to be nothing but doom, 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 doom. And once dooming sets in, it dooms anything that you're trying to do, just like its namesake says. So I think that the Trump administration is doing a great job with the long term. Up until the Signalgate issue, which I wouldn't call it a scandal, there had been very little for anybody to pull at, very little for the media to try to make a storm over. They tried big time with the Elon Musk stuff, with Doge, and they're hurting people. It doesn't work. People voted for this. Right. But I think that in the long term, it's sinking into the brains of the American public that it is okay to put your country's interests first and to get rid of fraud, waste, and abuse, and to not be the safety net of the rest of the world or the police force of the rest of the world. So I would say that as the story is being painted, this is a very effective way of moving towards a new future of nationalism. And I think that that's also picking up steam in many European nations where this is important. Unfortunately, they're about 20 years down the crappy path, further than we are, right? Usually everything that we suffer here in America, it's worse in Europe because it's been going on longer.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. One of the, I'm pretty optimistic. It's funny, something that I want to touch on before you leave the show is on doomerism. You mentioned doomerism and maybe how we define terms, because I think that can be a problem in the truth community, that just, there's a lot of talking past each other that happens, where what one person's doomer is another person's pragmatist, etc. But the reason I think that's funny is because most people consider me an optimist, but then some people can call me a doomer. But when it comes to the American kind of golden age and Trump 2.0, I feel very positive. I am a believer that there are plans going on. You can talk about that from a divine perspective. You can talk about that from a military intelligence perspective. I absolutely do subscribe to that. I do think that there's been a lot more going on, one of those kooks that thinks that. That said, when you mention Europe, and my wife is Canadian, I've got Canadian in-laws, so I'm exposed to a lot of international rhetoric about Trumpism. And it's especially interesting for me because I was a JFK Democrat, not born that way, but I voted for Obama in 2008. I'm a Boston, born and raised, New England liberal, and became a Trump supporter. So of course, naturally, everybody in my life thought I went crazy. But when I talk to my Canadian in-laws, one thing, I think long term it's going to be positive, but I do agree with you on the time scale. I really think that Europeans and maybe Canadians are going to be in for a bit of a shock in the coming years, because it feels to me like Trump and the two guys in his administration right now that I really like listening to from a narrative perspective are Scott Bessent and Howard Lutnick. They're talking about the financial stuff, right? And that's what the media is trying to go after him for. But to your point about short term versus long term, Trump and company seem to be telling a long term story to the American people, right? They're like, we need to bring the country back to what brought us to the dance in the first place. Now, the Europeans and the Canadians are vehemently opposing that, partly because we've basically been their piggy bank and we've been their protectors, which you would know about from a military lens. And I do think that the Europeans and the kind of globalist West, they're going to be in for a bit of a wake-up call when I feel like we're going to start pivoting and turning into the positive economically and everything before they are, because they've really been living off of us. So whatever short-term pain there is for Americans, it feels to me like it's going to be magnified for other Western countries. I wonder what you think of that, and I wonder, especially with your military experience, what you think of the West right now, like the kind of the allies post World War II, and how they treat us from a narrative perspective, from an actual perspective, post World War II, and what Trump is changing about that.
Ironically, we've sort of come full circle in the scenario I'm about to describe. So you mentioned two Trump cabinet officials on the economic side. Now, America became the world's superpower after World War II. Economics boomed, 1950s. This is where you had the American dream, and you had all the traditional imagery, the muscle cars, Route 66, the Americans conquering the world. One of the main reasons for that, not only was because of American innovation, but literally because everybody else who could have been among the most powerful of the world were in ruins from the Second World War. Ruins. You can look at some of the other countries. Now, this isn't the West. I'm talking about Russia. Something like 90% of the high school class, or the birth class of 1924, died in World War II. So you're looking at widespread devastation that allowed America to move up in the world, so to speak. Now, unfortunately for that, with the power came the corruption, and I call it affluenza, where the American dream, and I hate to criticize whole generations of people and paint with a broad brush. This is why, you get people that want to go after baby boomers as a whole.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of great baby boomers, but you have the generational change that takes place. And what's happening in America now, for the audience, please read the book by Howland Strauss called The Fourth Turning, the original book. This came out in the 90s, and it explains the changing of generational ideology. So right now, Generation Z is coming of age. They're already they're in their 20s. Some of them are younger than that. Some of them aren't really old enough to vote. But Generation Z aren't really ideological. This is why a lot of you on this channel, especially, are a lot like me, where you criticize ideology. I'm not a conservative, even though my personal viewpoints are going to be far to the right of just about even the most furthest right guy in the Texas Panhandle. But I don't think conservatism, and neither do you, obviously, given your background from New England and being a Northeastern educated liberal, right? And you've seen the light. So the fourth turning is an important thing for understanding this, because the kids these days, Generation Z, that would be the generation after mine, the millennials, they're very cynical. And I've got a lot of kids in my life that are in that generation. One of my own kids is barely in the generation. She's about to turn 13. And I also have stepkids, and I've got 3 of them that are Gen Zers, and they are by and large awake to all the nonsense. They're tired of everybody being accused of being racist and anti-woman, and they're not afraid to tell some pretty colorful jokes. So what you have going on is a natural turnover, where one generation is going to move on from the world naturally and be replaced by another, and they're all shaped by the events that are going on. So we have another thing coming full circle where the European Union is always teetering on the brink of financial ruin. You have some nations over there that are strong, and you have others that are weak that pull the whole thing down. For the longest time, Greece was the weak link in the chain. You got people retiring in their 40s and sitting on a very generous welfare system. In Canada, you've got a similar dynamic where you have they benefit on the tariffs that they slap on us, but then they cry when we slap tariffs on them. So we have untapped sources of wealth that could reverse almost all the economic and financial decay in this country if we were allowed to pursue our own interests, including energy and mineral resources, which I believe you saw the energy secretary recently said that would be, I think it was the interior secretary, actually, Doug Burgum, who said that there's trillions of dollars of wealth in the ground in America. And then you can look at the use of tariffs. And by the way, the founding fathers were in favor of tariffs. Tariffs is simply going to protect the interest of American workers and the American economy to encourage people to buy from us. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to turn a light on here because darkness is creeping up, and I don't want to scare your audience.
No problem. I love that he mentions obviously we've been talking about tariffs a lot here, but I think, again, looping this into sort of the narrative and the narrative deployments of the Trump administration, I think one of the most brilliant things about tariffs, I mean, from an actual perspective, the reason I don't worry about actuals as much is twofold. Number one, I can't control them, right? Like, you can control the actuals around your own life. Really, you can control your moves, and hopefully those moves radiate outwards, right? They've got the butterfly effect, local action, national impact, all that. I believe in all that kind of stuff. But when you worry too much about actual results on a national or even global scale, I don't know who it was in Badlands. Maybe it had been Kyle or Brad or somebody had been talking to me years ago about, humans were never designed to be taking in as much information from the sources that we're taking it in. That's leaving aside the fact that those sources are lying to us. Just even if they were all telling us the truth, right? If Europe is telling us the truth, if Canada's telling us the truth, and the US government's telling us the truth, there's never been a point in human history where a person is living in a place where they're getting information from all over the nation and from all over the world all the time and are being asked to formulate ideas about that information. So that's why I try not to focus as much on the actual. But on the narrative level, when you bring up tariffs, I think one of the brilliant things about what Trump has done is the reciprocal tariffs. So tariffs in general, as you said, are obviously going to be pretty effective. But from a kind of narrative perspective, I like seeing when Trump deploys things that are very difficult for even the establishment to attack. And to me, they've been attacking tariffs, right? Like these are bad. They're going against our allies. But reciprocal tariffs are very difficult to attack because it's in the name, right? Like, as you said about Canada, hey, we're not doing anything to you that you're not literally doing to us right now. So I wonder what you think about that compared to normal tariffs. And these are supposedly kicking off this coming week.
Well, if what's good for the goose is good for the gander, if they're going to play games and put tariffs on us, then why would we not retaliate with tariffs? We're supposed to protect our own interests. And the most amazing thing about what these folks that oppose an America First ideology is every other country on earth has their own form of government. Now, unless we're talking about a straight dictatorship that has no representative government. But even some countries that don't really are no respecters of human rights, they have government in which people can seek redress of grievances. It may not be a very good redress of grievances, but every other country's government focuses on the needs of that country, with the exception of some of the most powerful European countries who are led around by the nose by the same kind of people that are trying to lead our country around. So our country exists, our government exists to benefit the people of our country. So it's just common sense to me that you would level the playing field with whatever means you had necessary to do that. So I fully support the plan to slap tariffs on every country. And also, especially, Trump is big on the narrative of making people pay their fair share for military protections. So even if we're not fighting in foreign wars, it can't be won. So for those of you who aren't familiar with my story, I was in the Army from 2008 to 2013 on active duty. I got out December of 2013 and I did 6 months in the reserves. So basically 6 years from 2008 to 14, transitioning from George Bush into Barack Obama. And you look at the military social experimenting going on up until the last 2 months. We were battle-hardened Spartan warriors compared to the military that was around under Joe Biden with all the social experimentation going on. So I could no longer – I saw somebody in your comments referencing Ron Paul. I read one of his books when I was on a training exercise in Alaska, and I realized that we were like ancient Rome, a welfare warfare state, and I could no longer invest my life in support of wars that cannot be won. Because every time you go over there, now if you do come back intact, you don't always come back intact up here. So when you go there, you're going through a very difficult time in your life, away from people you love and support. So it's a big investment in your life to go over there. And I couldn't justify it anymore. And a lot of people started to get that vibe. We have not been fighting wars that matter. But there is a purpose for the military, even if you're not fighting wars. Of course, you can't strip it all the way down, because you look at the situation in Greenland. J.D. Vance and company went up there this week, which was a hilarious thing when he walked in. He was an enlisted guy in the Marine Corps. And he walked in there into the chow hall and he said, "It's cold as shit up here." Right. He's one of the guys in that respect. And honestly, my opinion of J.D. Vance is very much improved from what I thought I knew about him in the summer of 2024. Okay. So, and another thing is that you should be pulling for him to be the nominee in 2028, because if he's not, then it says very bad things about what's going to unfold from now until then. So I would like to see him, the old adage where it's like, I didn't vote for your guy, but I hope I vote for his reelection. Yeah. Means the last 4 years have been good. It's the same thing. So the military is important for controlling shipping lanes like we have in Greenland up there, where you're going to have China and Russia competing for the mineral wealth of the Arctic, but also the trade routes. And that's a very important thing. We're way behind the Russians and the Chinese when it comes to naval supremacy in the Arctic. In fact, China has begun the process in the last decade or so of creating artificial islands in the South China Sea where they can park their massive navy, and they're starting to build that out. They definitely have goals to take over the world, at least economically.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because some of my maybe they're popular these days, but a few years ago were not popular, were writings about Russia, specifically around Ukraine, gotten into more China research in the last year and a half, but specifically Russia. And my guest last time, Matt Ehret, was a Canadian, and he's a historian, and we were talking about U.S.-Russia relationship going back, a couple centuries now. And when you mentioned the Arctic and Greenland and everything, it's fascinating to me right now watching this narrative game play out between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. Specifically, they're talking about Ukraine, that takes up all the headlines. But when you mention the Arctic, in between all these back and forths about Ukraine, you have leaders from the Kremlin and Moscow talking about joint economic projects with the United States. And then very recently, I think it was Medvedev was talking about Arctic partnerships with the United States, strategic partnerships between the United States and Russia in the Arctic. And then you combine that with a lot of what Trump is talking about and his orbit around Greenland, and now he's kind of targeting Canada. And it's absolutely fascinating to me to see, how much of these things, how much of the actuals that we're going to be moving into are, maybe they're not set in stone, but they're kind of trying to guide us toward these things. And then they're deploying all these narratives like, hey, you know what's important? The Arctic. And Russia thinks it's important, and the U.S. thinks it's important. And to your point, the Canadians think the Chinese think it's important. So I've thought it was interesting recently. I've taken it as a positive thing to think that, well, if the Russians are already talking about joint economic projects in the Arctic, then they know that they want to be on our side rather than opposing us. And when I bring up Ehret, he was telling me the last few weeks that we almost had these joint economic projects back in the late 1800s with Russia before the world wars kicked off, because that would change the whole map, right? If you've got kind of cooperative trade routes going on in the Arctic between two global superpowers, that definitely seems to change the game board.
This is not a new thing in the Arctic. Andrew Jackson, the 7th president of the United States, was interested in Greenland. And of course, shipping was what they had then. They didn't have air cargo. And of course, you can't just air cargo everything in massive shipping containers across the world anyway. Nobody could afford that. But the issue with the Arctic is it's a key place. I see people in the comments talking about the melting of sea ice. It's another valid thing. And this is not a global warming alarmism thing. This is just normal. The climate does change over time, and it changes back. But Canada has a lot of Arctic territory too. And if you read The Art of the Deal, Trump is famous for asking for this when he wants this. So you don't need 1,900 miles or whatever, how many miles it is, of border wall. You have hundreds of miles of the American-Mexican border is impassable anyway due to terrain, to where if you do have anybody get over it, it's going to be like one guy who's a triathlete that got over. And then he's going to wind up on the American side in the middle of nowhere. So the goal is therefore to concentrate forces to control the high-speed avenues of approach where tons of people get across. So he may only need 500 miles of wall materials based on the operational needs and the ability to funnel people to other points. Likewise, I have never for one moment believed that we want Canada as a U.S. state, or more likely, a series of states. Canada has 10 provinces and 3 territories. So I did the math on this on Substack in December, and I called it the electoral hell of Canadian statehood, and I called it that for good reason. Because it looks like you would have 7 states or so come in. And based on the way Canada votes, so everybody is obsessed with Alberta. They think that Alberta is this based hardcore Republican state. No, it is conservative relative to the rest of Canada. It still has big cities. It has Calgary and Edmonton. And then a thing that keeps them more to the right is oil. So it's possible over the course of decades it could shift into becoming a Republican state, but it's not going to be a cowboy Republican state like Idaho or most of Montana. Right. Montana's hardcore Republican now because the white working class, the railroads, and the miners became hardcore Trump type people. Prior to that, Montana had some competitive races, and they would play Democrat ball at state politics. But Yellowstone culture has also shifted that a little bit there too. But Alberta would probably be the closest state from Canada. I think it would still vote blue, and I believe you're looking at 63 Democrat electoral votes off of Canada to 0 Republican. And you would be looking at 14 Democrat senators and God knows how many Democrat House members. So you would always lose the Senate and the House every single time. And you would have to really pull a straight flush to win the presidency. Trump actually would have still won the presidency in the last race with that formula, but just by a hair. So I think that Trump's play in Canada is to capitalize on coming economic problems that have already manifested. The global elite have already parachuted in Mark Carney too.
A literal central banker, like globalist.
He came in from England. I mean, how insane is that?
It's crazy.
Imagine the Democrats got their nominee and they flew him in from the European Union and claimed that he had American citizenship. And
Bank of England leader.
Right. So I think that Trump would be interested in Yukon territory, the Northwest Territories, and Nunavut. Nunavut is Canada's equivalent to Greenland. It's the native areas where you have their version of Native Americans up there, the Inuit type people with those islands that extend up into the Arctic Ocean. I think that Trump would be interested in having some sort of territorial claim or agreement to use those in some sort of a partnership or perhaps even buy them. Eventually, somebody's going to start buying countries again when people go belly up. But no, I don't think we would want the populated areas of Canada contributing to American elections.
Yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I've been saying on this show for some time, on various shows, there's a lot of people I've known in Canada. I lived there when I was dating my wife, and guys I would have thought were quote unquote based. To your point about Alberta, they certainly think of themselves as based. But I learned during COVID that there's a big, big difference between what a lot of Canadians think of as based and what a based American thinks of. And an example I always use is there might have been guys I knew up there that disagreed with COVID mandates and vaccine mandates, but they were utterly shocked that my wife and I chose not to get vaccinated. Like they just, even though they agreed on a moral level with our decision, they were almost shocked that we could just do that or not do that to the point. They're like, well, but the government told you to, right? So I would have similar concerns to you. I think that they're valuable and kind of sober to bring up of saying, yeah, there's a lot of Canadians that are ideologically aligned more and more with the kind of sovereign tenets that we forward, but there is some deprogramming that needs to go on over maybe a longer period of time, because these are definitely people, and I wouldn't single the Canadians out. I mean, Europeans, Germans, English, that absolutely have a statist mindset. You know, Chris Paul, who you mentioned earlier, I think he accurately reminds people that oftentimes, especially when we're talking about people like Con Inc., people that we claim are Con Inc., if you want to know who's Con Inc. and who's not, you simply look for the person who's espousing statist values, right? The type of people that are espousing values that are all about what the government can grant to you as rights rather than what you can grant to the government as rights.
Well, and on the topic of, I hate the term conservatism, but on the topic of right of center political beliefs, Canadian conservatives, that's our actual party. Canadian conservatives don't need to worry about gun rights. They have very few gun rights. They can own long guns. They have to be regulated. The MO is regulated. It's hunting based. So you're not really going to be dealing with guns in Toronto and in areas in the populated parts of Canada. Going through there from the US to Alaska through Canada when I was in the Army was they dump your truck up and down, making sure you're not carrying any firearms. So there's no concern for firearm rights. They don't have a third world country as their southern neighbor. So they're not hardcore about the border. They are deeply entrenched in government services like government healthcare, in which people are dependent on, and they are far less religious than we are. So they don't even have a Bible Belt region. So you're going to have an electorate that begins far to the left of America. And it would take a long time for that to come in. And now speaking of statist values and what the government can give, Greenland. I've done a lot of research on Greenland, and they're like Puerto Rico, where they talk a big game about independence all the time. You know, Puerto Rico, they would always hold. I was actually born in Puerto Rico, little known fact. So when I feel like writing it down on paper, I call myself Hispanic because
awesome.
I may not look that Hispanic when you see me, but
yeah. Hey, I'm Black Irish. I think that passes as Black in certain circles.
El Capitan. So anyway, Puerto Rico always talks a big game about independence. They have these ballot initiatives during their local elections where they assess where the population stands on independence. And they're always beating their chest about independence. And then when times are bad and they're belly up economically, they all want to become a state. So the same thing is true of Greenland. They get $700 billion or $700 million every year in some sort of a grant from the Danish government. And they always act like they want independence. And then you can look in the finer details of the polling, and it says only if it doesn't come with a setback to our quality of life. So, this is a problem where it's difficult to have an explosive economy in a place like Greenland. I don't know that they're big on fossil fuels in Greenland. So you're looking at a place where you got the fishing industry. It's too cold to have much of a timber industry like you might have in British Columbia. But yeah, it's sort of an economic wilderness. So the appetite for independence is quenched by needing to be on your own.
Right. Yeah, well said. I know I don't have you for too much longer. Obviously, you're the elections man. You're one of the elections guys. So I want to, obviously, that's been huge in the news recently. I was reading your Substack about it. I want to get to that before we get out of here. But we obviously had the big executive order recently about U.S. elections. You mentioned Chris Paul. He's our patron saint of I don't know what you'd call it, election denialism, election, that's what some people say about it. We took a lot of shit, Chris probably more than anybody, about what we would describe as first principles argumentation throughout 2024. Other people would describe that. This is what I was referencing earlier. Some people would describe that as dooming. I strongly disagree with that. I think it's possible to believe that Trump was going to quote unquote win the 2024 election, that there is Patriot plans, that there are a lot of good things happening, while also wanting to keep some signal and keep some rational kind of concern on the system itself. In the theme of this show, the narrative, I know you talk about elections all the time from an actual perspective, from a systemic and again, actual perspective. I'm wondering, first of all, what are the major things you pulled out of the executive order, in terms of that you really liked to see, maybe stuff that you were looking for from an actual perspective? And then secondly, it really encouraged me from a narrative perspective. And I think it encouraged Chris and John and the people that have been talking about the 2024 election and saying, hey, listen, we're very happy that Trump is the president right now, but we are concerned that there are too many in MAGA, quote unquote, who are very quick to say, well, hey, our guy won. Let's stop looking behind door number 3 over here. Like, let's just move on. So for me, it was encouraging that Trump sort of knowingly kind of focused on that. Like, it felt to me like he was being a little playful with it, of saying, hey, maybe you thought this was going away. It's not going away. We're still focused on it. So I wonder what you think, again, from an actual perspective, the biggest things, and from a narrative perspective of how you think Trump is rolling out conversations about the election system, given that he won in an election system that may or may not be compromised.
Chris is an interesting guy to talk to. We've always gotten along. I would actually hate very much, and you can show him this segment, I would hate very much to be on his shit list because he is somebody that delivers some pretty solid zingers against people. We don't agree on everything. Now, I fully agree that he is very accurate in narrative. Every lie they've created in society is built on some narrative, and they're all made up in a house of cards. But I am more of a pragmatist in some ways, where I have what I want, what I believe, and then I have, here's the current reality. Maybe that's just the military officer in me. But I don't go as far to say that all elections are worthless. I like Chris says the term fake elections, and President Trump actually said that the other day too. And I commended, Chris, hey, guess what he said? I call them quasi elections. So the 2024 election data gave me a lot of value. It helped me confirm or deny suspicions about the 2020 election. And in most cases, my assessments from 2020 stood up where this looks like this was inflated. I believe that what happened in 2024 was they wanted Harris to win the election, but they couldn't have her sitting on 86 million votes. All right. So that's why you had a narrative pop in about 6 weeks before the election that Harris was going to lose the popular vote but win the electoral college. So I think the play, and this is what my research shows, there were only 6 states that Harris had more votes than Joe Biden. And with the exception of Maine, they were all battleground states. A couple of examples would be North Carolina, Georgia, Wisconsin. All right, so these are your battleground states where Harris has more votes than Biden. So Harris was Joe Biden 2.0, but only in the battlegrounds. Everywhere else she got clobbered. She lagged Biden by about 17% in California, her home state. She lagged Biden by more than 15% in New York. And Trump didn't really have big gains in California or New York, where you're going to be expecting a massive drop-off for the Dem. So I think that the ballot harvesting machines laid low in the safe blue and safe red states. So I think that elections are quasi-elections in which they're made up of real votes and fake votes, unless you want to go as far as like Trump got thrown into office by the regime to con us. I don't believe that.
Yeah, I don't either.
Because I'm not one of these people that's going to go justify that by saying that the assassination attempt against Trump was fake. It's not. I don't believe that. Right. So my read on this is that Trump was targeted by lawfare and then by bullets, so he couldn't become president. And then he did become president. So as far as his order, I wrote it up on Substack, and it's a lengthy. I mean, I documented a 3,000 word order with a 2,000 plus word article describing the order, and it is, in my opinion, groundwork for what is to be done. Because if you watch the video, and I think you can see it where I'm talking about Stephen Miller. So there's the video of Trump signing the order with Susie Wiles sitting right there, and Stephen Miller. And
oh yeah, I've got it. You want me
Trump
to play
said,
a little bit of it?
Sure.
All right.
Election fraud. You've heard the term. We'll end it, hopefully. At least this will go a long way toward ending it. There are other steps that we will be taking in the coming weeks, and we think we'll be able to end up getting fair elections. Perhaps some people think I shouldn't be complaining because we won in a landslide, but we got to straighten out our election. This country is so sick because of the election, the fake elections and the bad elections, and we're going to straighten it out one way or the other.
Yeah. Yeah, go on.
So what is to come in the coming weeks should be the next question. And he signs that order, and I believe reading through it, especially the portion about critical infrastructure, he's directed the DHS and the Election Assistance Commission to run an evaluation about the security problems with electronic voting systems. I was just on a call last week with some German government officials who were briefing me and some members of the Arizona legislature on German election systems, which they have some of their own vulnerabilities, in my opinion, but clearly I think they've developed safeguards for the cheating that happens. And they don't allow.
That's why they're talking about banning parties outright, right?
Right. They don't allow electronic voting at all. It's all paper.
Okay.
All paper. Now, I'm also not the guy who thinks it's all machines, because you wouldn't have mail-in ballots if it was all machines. Machines do not afford any transparency. That's really the only way you're going to get anywhere with somebody that needs to be convinced of, of this. So I think that what you're looking at here is Trump is about to lay the groundwork for orders to ban all electronic voting. And I've seen a proposed executive order for getting rid of the electronic elections infrastructure, which I cannot share. But that is something that I think is probably on the way. Now, as someone who wants to get this problem fixed, the most important part of taking care of our elections problem is getting rid of the corruption of the voter registration system. That is the foundation of all of this. So the mail-in ballots and machines, those are just mechanisms of casting a vote or tabulating a ballot, I should say. But the mechanism of the fraud lies in the voter registration system. And the reason I know this is because the state of North Dakota doesn't have voter registration at all. And all of my numbers for the past 3 or 4 cycles suggest that North Dakota is the only state with predictable trend lines in the 2020 election. And you just show up with an ID and you vote. But states that have automatic voter registration are particularly bad. Kamala Harris only won 5 electoral votes that were not under automatic voter registration. Trump won those 248 electoral votes to 5. He lost the other ones 221 to 64. So automatic voter registration, flood the voter rolls with bad voters. Yeah. Then you amp up mail-in balloting. The goal is universal mail-in balloting, where they go to everybody without request. But there's secondary goals like motor voter, turning out all these ballots on permanent early voting lists, and then a lengthy period of time on both ends of the election, front and back, to go harvest up these ballots. So what we've done is we've robbed the integrity of elections away from a vote receiving contest to a ballot collecting contest. It's an adult Easter egg hunt. And that is where you have states, who taught me that was Brad Parscale. He's got a very mixed opinion depending on who you ask. Some people hate his guts. He had his own issues with the Trump administration on the way out in 2020. But I did one event with him in LA County, California, in last year around this time. And he made a point that you have messaging states like Florida, Texas, where a certain message will fly and deal with votes. And then you have ballot states like Pennsylvania. And that couldn't be more accurate. So corruption of the voter roll, expansion of mail-in balloting, legalization and non-penalization of ballot harvesting, and then the final ingredient to the recipe is time, and you have very likely a blue state. So elections, this is where I would tell Chris, this is where I would disagree with Chris. I think that the elections picture in the United States is like a casino, where I would never say as part of your financial success plan that you should go up to the Golden Cactus Casino and plop down $10,000. But you might win. You might win.
Right.
But the casino didn't build itself. Those beautiful buildings didn't just build themselves. So the games are rigged, even though you can win them sometimes. But if you play them enough times, statistically speaking, the house is going to win. So that's why you run enough races through this system, then barring a fluke or barring Donald Trump is one of the most famous people in world history now since Christ. I mean, you're talking about he's probably on the top 20 list of most instantly recognizable famous people. And it's not even just an American thing anymore. He's become a worldwide phenomenon. Now, the next person that runs for the Republican Party, who's not one of the most famous people in the history of the world, as we're seeing in these special elections, is going to feel the full brunt of a crooked election system.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's very well said. I mean, I haven't really heard it put that way, but it really is like we are living, and I think a lot of this is going to come with hindsight for a lot of people, even people that hate him. But this is the Trump epoch, right? Like there's Trumpism. There is before Trump and after Trump. And, this show is even kind of a funny example of this, besides the fact that so many of the Badlands hosts came from different walks of life. You're an Army captain. I was a liberal, fiction writer from Boston University style crap voting for Obama's. And it's like we're trying to talk about whether or not the U.S. election system is totally fake and gay or just a little bit fake and gay. I think that's a very positive thing of the effects that Trump has had. I like the way you laid that out. I think that, and I think you understand this, you've talked to Chris plenty of times, on air, off air, and I think a lot of what he does, and some people don't get this, is he is deploying narratives too, right? Like, he isn't sitting there, I don't think, thinking that very literally the entire election apparatus is fake. I think that's more of a narrative deployment of saying, really to the point you just made about the casinos. I think the reason we focus on it so much here is obviously you would agree with this. Our election system should not be a casino, right? Like, and I think the reason that we hammer it home so hard, even when we win elections, is if people kind of go back to sleep and they're like, oh, our guy won. The point you just made, I think, is a really big one of saying, yeah, the most famous sovereign-minded American of the last several hundred years won in this system. Is J.D. Vance going to win in the same system? Is, X, Y, and Z, Build a Republican, or whoever you want to say, going to win in this system? And I wonder what you think. I think this is a positive move. I think you laid out reasons it's a positive move. To me, it feels like the be-all, end-all that we do not have in the U.S. election system, the U.S. government, whatever. Take Doge, take the Trump deployments, is transparency. I know that is so obvious. I know it's so simple to say. But what are your thoughts on if Americans could somehow verify, like just go in and verify that their vote was counted as they submitted it? It feels like a massive difference, and that, to me, no matter what Trump does, like the elections could be totally cleaned up. But when I go, I'll tell you from experience, when I go and vote in Massachusetts, I have no faith at all that me putting that piece of paper in that little box when nobody wants my, not only did they not ask for my ID, they specifically don't want it when I want to present it. Do you think that part of the path he's taking us down is also transparency, not just cleaning up the election system itself, but making sure that the American people can see what's going on in the election system?
It seems like you already brought up Doge being an effort in transparency. And it's so it's I've always known they've wasted our money on taxes, but it's so enraging to think about the stuff that they spend it on. Like I said, every other country in the world has its own government, which is supposed to deal with the affairs of its own people. Okay, that is not a racist point. That is not any sort of bigoted point whatsoever. It is every other country has its own government to fix its own problems, and you can't help everybody. You know, if everybody in the chat right now needed $10 from you, you've got a 3-year-old. You know, you can't
3-month-old.
Yeah, so you got a 3-month-old. Excuse me, but you can't help everybody. You cannot be the world's lifeboat, or eventually you'll capsize the lifeboat. This is why liberals are so wrong. There's 7.4 million, or 7. My numbers are off today, guys. I fried myself predicting every race right in the 2024 election. There's 7.4 billion non-Americans in the world, and about half of them make less than $2 a day. So I would assume that there's at least 3 billion people that would love to come to the United States today if given the opportunity to do so. Then what would happen to the United States? So when we look at the transparency that's required, that's really what would cure the election system. You might be surprised to hear this, but living in Massachusetts, you live in a state that has elections that are better than at least half of the other states.
Really?
Massachusetts doesn't really do early voting. They also, like the rest of New England, they report their votes by township. So you have a very quick count that goes through. Now, they still have issues. Some of the states have pretty good laws. Rhode Island has decent laws. Massachusetts has decent laws. Now, they both have the fatal flaw of automatic voter registration. So they're accurately counting potentially bad ballots. The most corrupt state in all of New England in elections is Maine, and that is an easily documentable thing. They even have ranked choice voting. But transparency would cure this issue. And speaking of transparency, I'm sure that out of 4,300 people watching the chat right now, there's a pretty solid chunk of military veterans or people that have family in the military, so military sympathetic people. And I always make the point, I call it the parable of the piss test. Now, if that sounds a little bit sacrilegious, that's not my intent. A parable
That's what this show's about.
A parable is simply a story made to display a simple truth. So one time, a lot of times. So anybody that's been in the military, if you have a 4-day weekend, let's say it's 4th of July or Memorial Day, or you have a long period of leave for Christmas, then typically you can bet your bottom dollar the first day back in formation that the unit commander is going to call for a unit-wide urinalysis piss test. And, it could be a 10% where they pick 10% of the unit, so there's still a risk. But oftentimes you got the whole unit where, surprise, there's no workout today. You're just going to take this vial and give us a urine sample. They never tell you beforehand. So imagine a soldier that spent the 4th of July weekend shooting up heroin. All right, and he shows up at PT formation, and he says, "Hey, sir, mail me my piss test, and I'll get it back to you on Friday." Do you think in any way that a company commander or a battalion commander would authorize mail-in piss tests?
Right.
And
No.
the answer is no, because that would come with the understanding that since you didn't want to give me a urine sample right now, that you're clearly going to get someone else to piss in this cup for you and send me back a bad sample. They don't even play games with this. They're actually supposed to watch it go into the vial. But if you can't go and you're not hydrated, it's here's water, sit here and drink, and we'll stay here all morning until you give the sample. There is no exception to this. One of the biggest inhibitors to running fair elections in this country is the fact that Republicans, so not everyone's political. This is one of the biggest things. I've got a huge following of over 300,000 on social media, and I guess I've probably become one of the bigger names maybe in the world with election integrity in mind. My Substack is out there, but I go to standard Republican events to speak sometimes, like Vero Beach in February. And it's a lot of these people, "I've never heard of you, Sonny." And it's like, wow, you've never heard of me at all. So they're
watching Fox News.
Right, it's a big ocean out there, right? So not everyone is political, but a lot of Republicans are addicted to the convenience of mail-in balloting, which I don't see how it's that big of a perk. I mean, that's really like every other year you mail in a ballot twice from your desk. I just sent a letter in the mail today to a family member, and it was a pain in the ass. I had to go find an envelope. I had to get some scotch tape to make sure the envelope didn't come open. I had to go find a stamp. I had to find a pen that worked. It was a pain. You go out in person to go to the gym. You go out to shoot rifles at the range. You go out to watch a ball game. You take your kids to school. That's all in person. Go grocery shopping. So we become addicted to this thing that we're supposed to have as convenience. It's really not a convenient thing. But to let people vote where you can't see them and verify them, I don't believe illegals vote. I believe they're voted for. They appear on the rolls, and a ballot is furnished for this person by name. So,
right.
But if you had people show up with an ID and vote in person, and somebody could check it, you could use a surveillance camera to check it out. At the end of the night, you have a firm count of ballots that doesn't continue to grow over the course of days. The fact that we count ballots until December and candidates are shameless and declare victory in December is really a condemnation of what we believe to be the most consequential nation in modern times, America. And that's just, it's just not an acceptable thing. And the fact that we have so many people that are willing to give it credibility, that's where Chris Paul's right on the money. That is fake election nonsense. Mm-hmm. So we have to have standards. People want the states to have rights. Like that's one of the big causes of the Civil War, of course, was states' rights. And one of the states' rights that was in question was slavery, but states' rights. Okay. The 10th Amendment allows for any laws not listed specifically in the Constitution. The states are allowed to make their laws. Well, the case Texas versus Pennsylvania in 2020 from Ken Paxton's office alleged that Pennsylvania's miscarriage of its own election laws disenfranchised Texas's then 38 electors, and that was equal protections. So I would say that the federal government now has a mandate to rein in these lawless states in the way they conduct their elections. So the best and shortest path to fixing this would be for the DOJ to paper down every one of these states with lawsuits about automatic voter registration, mail-in voting, universal mail-in voting. It's insane. So until we do that, I can predict red and blue states based on what kind of laws they have. Yeah. But here's another thing. As far as theories that go out there, there's nothing like time to prove somebody right or a fraud. All right. So now with the 2024 election in the book, I got every pick right. I have a very, very hard time for people to say that I don't know what I'm talking about. So that's a feather in the cap. And likewise, any analysts like you or Chris Paul with accurate assessments grow more credible while other people fall off the wagon and start slinging assessments that make no sense. And one last point before I shut my big mouth. There is a big risk of election integrity taking a back burner if it's not thoroughly hit by executive orders or the Make Elections Secure Act legislation. Because I spent 3 years traveling every week to speak, and this is not about me. But the point is, I've spoken at one event in 2025. Still waiting on my next. Well, now my mission might be to stay in the information space. I've had this conversation before. People ask me all the time, "Are you going to work for the administration?" I don't know. It's not as easy as to get in there as you think, and there are no election integrity specialists working anywhere around the administration. But then again, Dan Bongino, when he took the deputy FBI director job, he stepped away from his media empire, right? Because you can't be a federal official and be a blatant partisan under, I believe that's is that the Hatch Act? But right. So it's possible. I mean, I don't know that I would be of good use to this country if I was pushing paper at the DOD. So unless I was pulled into a capacity where my expertise was at President Trump's disposal, maybe this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. So with that said, it's been an interesting 4 years. There's been a lot of people come up with a big mouth and leave not credible anymore, so that whole phrase about be careful who you follow usually matures itself, whether these people are right or wrong, full of crap or not. And it's easy to tell based on their track record. You can go look all my stuff up online, what I've predicted.
Yeah, very well said. I know you got to get out of here in a few minutes. I want to end with your Substack. I do have one more just kind of question or thought I want to get from you that you basically just led perfectly into. Kind of started the show this way, but you kind of teed me up to end this segment this way as well. I think it's wise that you point out it's about the track record. And one of the things that I try to point out is that I don't do what you do, right? Like I don't dig into data. You know way more about that than I know. And I know Chris isn't wired that way either. But I think that you can still have a track record as somebody who is not making specific predictions about outcomes. And that track record, I would say, is narrative. Again, theme of the show. But if you're consistently, I think, forwarding the same principles over time, you can be wrong about things, right? Like I'm sure that you've screwed up calls, maybe not in 2024, but before. That doesn't mean that what you're forwarding is not a principled stance. And the track record stands, right? It's not about like, oh, I got the end result right. It's about what is the methodology, what is the argumentation you're putting forward. The reason I say that is when you say be careful who you follow and stuff, one of the things that is the most difficult that I'm surprised by entering 2025 is that, you know, this network, a lot of the people that we talk to, including yourself, a lot of people in this whole space, we're kind of fighting the good fight all throughout that Biden era, you know, like standing up for what we believed was true, even when we disagreed with each other. And one of the terms I've been using recently is toxic positivity. It's interesting that you just mentioned the anecdote that you haven't been invited to speak about election integrity very much in 2025. And I would say that that's a symptom of the same issue that we've been pointing out around here, where strangely, it's almost like a portion of MAGA is riding so high emotionally right now, which I think is good. But the bad thing is, if they will take any sort of first principles argument, direct path, like, hey, there's still things we need to figure out. There's still things we need to keep fighting for going forward. They will take that and brand it as you're dooming, quote unquote, take the win, etc. And I just thought that you teed that up in an interesting way of how do you kind of reconcile that? You know, the mindset of we need to believe we can win, quote unquote, but that it's also important to not be naive about this stuff and just and sort of suppress people who are trying to talk about things in this open source manner.
So ultimately, to conclude this, it boils down to what it is you believe. If you believe that short-term outcomes equal the preservation of liberty and freedom for generations, which is my goal, you know, I'm 40. You know, the average man lives somewhere in the mid to upper 70s now. I'm a gigantic person, so I think my lifespan's shorter because I have more cells, something like that. But either way, I'm probably in my last 60 years on Earth right now. I've got 3 kids that are 13 and under. Probably in the next 10 or 12 years, I'll have a grandkid. So, you know, I've got 100 plus years of future already in my immediate bubble that I think about. So I'm not worried so much about the Wisconsin court election. All right. So if you're sitting here sweating the Wisconsin court election that you have, unless you're from Wisconsin, that you have very little influence over or control. I have influence over it. I can tell people to go vote, but control, you cannot control the outcome. All right. But look, if they get in office and they get people in office and they try to impeach President Trump in the long term, that's good because more and more people are going to wake up and see this crap for what it is. So winning a short-term battle does not help. Okay. Long-term success, slow and steady wins the race. And a lot of it is about the maintenance of your attitudes. Right. So I posted about this today, and a lot of you,
I was reading this before the show.
So I've posted about my dad a lot. My dad was an Army veteran, and an infantry officer in Vietnam. So he wrote me a lot of letters when I was in Afghanistan, and you know he wrote about attitude maintenance. Now I'm not gonna read the points that are going to get me emotional on the show, but you know it's about what our attitudes are as patriots. Okay, so a poor attitude. My dad wrote this. This is a letter. He was dying of cancer when he wrote this letter. He said, a poor attitude is quickly noted by others. Superiors weigh you by it. Peers judge you by it. Subordinates respond to it, for they are particularly afraid and need guidance that is positive. The enemy takes advantage of it if able. That last part, the enemy takes advantage of it if able. All right. So that's my military like advice to everybody is when you feel anxious about them winning stuff. I see people commenting about special elections. Look, special elections suck. They're low turnout, and whoever is president, his party suffers in special and midterm elections. That's how it is. Okay. Smaller turnout, the people that are out of power are mad and they go vote. So they have a better chance to win than they normally would. All right. But look, attitude maintenance is an important thing. And when you're worried about stuff and you feel like the world is falling apart beneath your feet, then that's when you should take up engagement and get involved. Now, not everybody has to be an influencer. I was not this is why I don't get all the influencer hate. There's good and bad influencers.
Yeah.
But I was just a guy that had a skill for election analysis. I had 0 followers outside of a personal Facebook account. And then circumstance and God gave me a platform. I have changed the way I operate within that platform because I've had a lot of personal life changes that I needed to make to get my nose out of my phone. But I'm still a part of the information war. So for those field leaders out there in the information war, you need to create more of you and get more people involved. The lack of participation in the special elections goes a long way to show you that most people don't get involved in this stuff because it takes effort. Okay, stuff that takes effort. It's the same reason that people are out of shape, because it takes a lot of effort to go out there and pick up that heavy ass stuff. Okay, it takes a lot of effort to go out there when it's hot outside and walk up that hill. But the result, the view, the fitness, the clarity of mind is always worth it. So get busy figuring out what it is you like to do when you do well. God gave you your passions for a reason. All right. And then when you pursue them, you will naturally, if you believe that God is going to put you in a role, you'll fall into where you need to be. And we could have all the influencers in the world, but if we don't have people in the counties and the cities and going to these meetings and doing these tasks that seem mundane, that's why we lose. Okay, so you got 4,625 people on the call right now. I don't know if all 4,625 of them are giving it their all and doing something, anything, right? There's plenty of opportunities. In fact, I posted on my Captain K's Corner 8 ways for every patriot to get involved. I posted that free article, I believe, last week. So my admonition to everybody is, if you feel anxious about the future of this country, every time you worry about it, figure out a way you can get involved. Figure out a way you can plug somebody else in. These Republican clubs that are all over the place, they can't be filled up with 85-year-olds the rest of the time with no young people. There's no young blood to replace them. And that's nothing against you 85-year-olds that have been kicking ass. We need you. But we have to have people that are busy getting involved about the work of preserving liberty and then passing it on to the next generations, or we won't have it, even though we have President Trump today.
Well said, Captain Cashel. Thanks a lot for coming by. I want to point people to your work, guys. I know we say this as a side sometimes. You know, I'm at Badlands. We get a lot of people at Badlands, but we all do a million things here. There's nobody in the quote unquote information war that you don't punch into the information war, employee club and collect your information war benefits. It can be tough. It can be tough out here. And I would implore people, if you follow Captain Seth Cashel, following on social media is one thing, but he's putting out a ton of work on 2 Substacks, which I didn't know about today, but you've got scashel.substack.com. That's your main one. It seems like that's kind of more analytical stuff. Yeah. And then you've got a secondary one.
The other one you're about to mention is my personal journal. Okay. It's not intended to be a big income provider. But the Captain K's Corner has been the reason I've been able to stay in this fight full time right now. Yeah. If it wasn't for Captain K's Corner, I would be pushing paper somewhere, getting laid off. So, and just remember, guys, if I were independently wealthy, everything I do would be free. There would be no costs for any of this. There would be no paywalls on articles. But I'm 40. I've got 3 kids and I've got 5 stepkids. So, you can do the math on that. But whenever you stand up, you are one presidential retweet away from your life changing forever in a way that you never imagined would happen. This is partially why some people remain anonymous. But for those who don't, or you are anonymous and you get unanonymous, then your life changes. And that is why you have influencers that you have to figure out if you want to support, but you need to support them based on merit. So I've never begged anybody to support my work. So I encourage you to go over there, check it out, and see what you think. But It is a pleasure to be on board with everybody. I appreciate what you do, engaging people's minds. We don't all have to agree about every theory there is, but we have to
Right.
point people towards action, or we're going to wind up like we felt in 2021 in those dark days, right?
Yeah.
And it's bigger than elections. It's bigger than politics. The country is not going to end over the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Promise you. I've been
Yeah.
here before. Every election, the most important election that's ever happened before, right? Every single election. Nope. Long-term success, slow and steady wins the race, and that's where it's at.
Yeah, thank you very much. And again, I think it's important you point out, it's one of the things we all struggle with, that we talk about and try to give each other advice, where people will praise you for being a quote unquote info warrior and trying to push the country in the right direction. But man, as soon as somebody starts sending you donations about it, they call you a PAY patriot. And this audience is very generous and really doesn't do that. But man, we got to help people that are trying to do this kind of stuff. To your point about anonymous and not, there's a reason I've kept my name anonymous, even though I show my face, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, we deal with lots of different stuff. Really appreciate you putting in the work. And I was halfway through that article about your father. I know that's on your personal journal, but that's, what's that one called? I'm a Free Man.
The Way of the Free Man.
The Way of the Free Man.substack.com. I know you're pushing the main Substack, and the main Substack is where you guys should go if you want to follow Seth's work. But I love that article. I love that kind of stuff. I love kind of getting into what animates people to get into these things. So really good stuff, and hope we'll have you on again. And I want to see you at another GART at some point. We got to get you to one of these again in the near future.
Well, let's do it. It's been since the Dallas Fort Worth one in 2022, I believe. But
the only one I didn't go to.
yeah. So make sure that you support Burning Bright and all the independent voices out there. It's a it's a battle out there, but ultimately it's one that is worth getting involved in. Just stand on.
Yeah.
Just be well studied. Be unimpeachable in what you do. And that article that you're talking about today in my personal journal, that's the very personal, vulnerable side of it. It's not the perfect public figure that you see out there. There's a lot of damage that we all have to get past. So this is a group of people that have got their own issues, and you have to work through it. A great friend of mine said you have to learn to be at peace with your past. And once you get at peace with your past, you can walk forward and do what it is that you're called to do.
Well said. Thank you for the time, Captain Keschel. We'll have you on again. He might be stopping by the Badlands Substack. He's written over there for us. So either way, follow him, follow all his work, and I will see you next time. Thanks a lot.
See you later.
All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed that. I don't want to, I'm liable to go 3 hours, etc. If I'm having people that I'm not doing shows with all the time on, I have to remember to try to be more conscious of their time, because they're giving us their time. They're doing all this other work. So really appreciate him stopping by. He gave us an hour and a half there. Great stuff. I really wanted to talk to Captain Keschel because, first of all, it's kind of funny in this InfoWars space. Like, you'll orbit certain people once you get into this stuff, whatever the hell it is that I do these days. And I'm like, I've ships passing in the night a dozen different times with Captain Keschel. I'm obviously good friends with Chris Paul, who is friends with Keschel, and Keschel's been around Badlands and he's been in and out, etc. But I've never actually gotten to speak to him. And I wanted to have him specifically on the narrative because he's one of the Trump, MAGA info warriors that is very focused or known for the actual quote unquote, he's constantly talking about voter rolls and registrations and the election system and real world solutions to these things, which I think are important. Of course, it's not what I usually talk about, but I wanted to get into his mind about what about the story, what about the very big picture of this stuff. And it's not because I didn't think he thinks about that stuff. I know he thinks about that stuff for a fact. I wanted you guys to know that he thinks about that stuff because I think the problem in the info war, one of the problems that I have struggled with as well, is that it's almost like you become known for something, right? Like if you're putting work out, we're all just putting work out there, and then maybe the work gets discovered, and then naturally, the people who discover that work, they're discovering whatever that work is at the time, right? So if Captain Keschel's writing about election fraud and he's writing about systemic solutions to it, etc., that's what his initial followers know him for, then ironically it creates this feedback loop where everyone then who starts to follow him follows him because of that. I think that's good. I think that's important. But I think it's important to remember that there's a lot more that somebody like Seth Keshel has to offer. And this is just where my mind goes, you know, how I'm personally geared. Some people are going to follow Captain Keshel specifically around elections, and I think that that's valuable. I did not know he had this secondary Substack here, thewayofthefreeman.substack.com. I was reading this before the show, How I Met My Father, long after he died. The meditations of the heart challenged by those wondering why I lionize a father who caused more than his share of pain. Hey, he put this stuff out publicly. Obviously, he's good with sharing it. You know, this is who Info Warriors are, right? This is who he is. And I believe, I mean, I'm a storyteller. I'm very biased. I'm a storyteller and a connoisseur of stories. So that fascinates me. But how can you follow somebody? How can you really trust fully what they're doing and their deployments without really getting into who they are? And I know I've learned that that's why a lot of you guys follow Badlands. It's not because we've been the most correct about things. I think it's because a lot of the people here come off as authentic, and I think authentically good, authentically assholes at times, right? Like I don't give a shit. I mean, it is what it is, right? Like we are who we are, and one of the most encouraging things to me of meeting you guys in person is the irony that happens sometimes where you're like, oh man, I didn't think I could just come up to you guys. And at Badlands, we think that is super weird because we're just regular people, right? But Captain Keshel has talked about this in the past, and we've talked about it. Many of you have told us about it. You go to these other conferences, even if they're quote unquote MAGA, and you know, I'm not trying to bash these people because I'm not talking about Con Inc. right now. I'm talking about real, you know, patriots, etc. But they'll do these events, and it's like you can't talk to them. They're inaccessible. Nobody reads their comments, etc. We try to engage with you guys. I try to engage with you guys, and Keshel does that very well. He's got a lot of followers, a lot of people. You know, maybe they're not paying as much attention because we're not in the middle of some big election controversy. But, you know, ironically, we don't want to get into a place where we all have to suddenly remember that guy Keshel because something's going wrong in the election system or something's not going the way we want. That's why we talk about this stuff as honestly as we can. And we have to keep talking about it. And I know some of you get annoyed when we talk about Con Inc. and when we talk about gatekeeping, and the way I've been framing it lately is toxic positivity. It is a problem. It is a problem in the MAGA Q truth space right now. You can believe that there is a Patriot plan. You can believe that every single thing they said in the Q drops is 100% accurate, and that it's the point to pay attention to what's going on, to try to advance first principles arguments in favor or against whatever you're looking at. And I like to have a little more faith. In my opinion, a lot of the people who are only trust the plan, sit back, they're actually not putting a lot of faith into Patriots, because for me, the Patriots, I believe, Patriots want us to be activated, right? While also being positive. And I think that's one of the great things that Keshel gets across is, you know, it's a cliche, but the happy warrior refrain, right? I do think that's important. And I think a lot of the Q people have that. They've got that in spades. But, you know, you can't, being a happy warrior doesn't mean you start demonizing people who are questioning things. That's ridiculous. So I know that most of you are on board with that, but we're going to keep banging that drum. I think that the reason a lot of you probably saw people like Chris Paul get a big boost energy-wise after Trump's comments on elections is not because any of you were shocked that Trump is talking about election fraud. It's the way he talked about it. We specifically said, a lot of people don't think I should be talking about election fraud because we won. But, and you don't even need to hear the rest, that is the signal. That is what people like Chris are talking about. Take elections out of it. It can be anything else. First principles forward argumentation. Are you putting forth arguments because you have analyzed the argument and you believe in the foundation of the argument that you are forwarding? Or are you forwarding the argument because you like the person who said it? If it's the latter, even if you end up being correct, you are wrong on a moral level. And you need to rewire what your thought process is. It doesn't mean that you don't use people you like as signal or use people you don't like as counter signal. I do that all the time and it's valuable. But you have to believe why you're advancing arguments or not advancing arguments. And when we saw a lot of MAGA saying, don't look at the election system, maybe you guys overstated election fraud in 2020 because Trump won in 2024, man, is that the wrong path to go down. And Donald took him 3 months, but Trump maybe was waiting around to make sure people got it on their own until he gave a little assist there and said, hey guys, yeah, the elections are still fraudulent. I think it's wise that Keschel says they're not fake, quote unquote. But yeah, they're fraudulent. They've got big issues. When I mention transparency, I want to get this point across. I think everything Captain Keschel pointed out makes sense in terms of transparency of the election results. My opinion on election transparency, what's more important to me is actually, there's a lot of talk about voter ID. I think we need vote ID. So in other words, if you go to the voting booth and you cast a vote, you cast a ballot, I think there should be two IDs, a public key and a private key. You know, you don't even need blockchain for this. You can do this on a traditional ledger. You don't need blockchain. I take my tag, I go home, I have my public key, and then there's a private key, and or I have my private key, then there's a public key assigned to my vote. I can go online, I can go into the Massachusetts database and see that my vote was counted as it was intended to be counted. That means nobody else has to have access to how I voted, which is the argument the government's going to use against transparent elections, right? They're going to say, we want to preserve privacy. We want to preserve that kind of thing for the American people, right? Well, you can still do that while having vote ID. And then if all Americans were capable of checking their own vote, the power that independent auditors like Captain Seth Keschel would have in that environment to then take a canvas of votes would be verifiably more accurate than anything that we've got right now. It's such a simple thing, and there's a reason they haven't implemented it. So I'm hoping that we get more transparency, right? From where I'm sitting, Trump and company can say whatever they want about voter rolls, and yeah, like, sure, maybe, all right, maybe. I mean, maybe that's the solution. But if I can't verify that my Donald Trump vote was counted as a Donald Trump vote, this is fucking stupid. What are we doing? What are we doing? I can go to the DMV and literally any process that you involve the state government with, you can go online later that night with how bad our government is and immediately verify what action you took in relation to that government earlier that day, except for when it comes to voting. So it's a super simple idea. I'll probably be killed for forwarding it. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who has, right? But these are the kind of common sense things like, yeah, dead people on the voter rolls, get that cleaned up, stop illegals from voting, get rid of like whatever voting machines are corrupted. Sure, yep, fine. The bottom line is if the American people could verify each of their votes individually, we would not have this this lack of trust in the system. Because even if you get cleaned up voter rolls and cleaned up elections on an actual level, if the American people, and by the way, guys, you better start thinking about never Trumpers in this. I know that everybody thinks that there's only like 10 of them. There are not. There are tens and tens and tens of millions of never Trumpers in this country. We are the majority. We are not the vast majority that MAGA thinks we are. I know this because I live in a blue area, and even though it's not as blue as people say about it, you know, in the battle space, that is an incorrect bubble mindset that MAGA has that is not reflective, that is not representative of reality. You need to go into a blue state and start talking to people, and you're going to find a much better battle space than you were in a few years ago, but it is not what a lot of you that are in Texas or Tennessee or whatever think is going on in this country. And my point there on vote ID is that those people also need to have faith in their votes counting as well. Because even if they're losing elections to Trump and to the MAGA agenda in the future, they need to know that they're losing those elections fair and square. Not that we're the ones now rigging the elections, because that's all you're going to get. You're going to get the other side just saying MAGA is rigging elections against them. Trump's putting executive orders out that we're cheerleading because they're great. You know, Seth Keshel points out a lot of great things about them on the Power Hour. We've been talking about it for weeks. But if the quote unquote left doesn't or thinks that he's acting as a dictator, you're not going to convince them. So the best way to convince them is to say, why don't you just go online and see where you vote, how your vote was counted? Well, right now they can't, right? So simple stuff, but, you know, wouldn't want to upset the quote unquote take the win crowd. Anyway, I'm going to hang out here for a few minutes with you guys. If anybody has any Rumble rants or anything you want to send over, go ahead and send it over. And I will get to that. Before I get on to you guys, I want to thank our second sponsor for tonight's show, and that is our friends at River. River announces Bitcoin interest on cash. US dollars in your River account will earn a high-yield interest rate that can be paid in Bitcoin. With the price of groceries, mortgage, and tuition on a steep rise, people are now looking at a retirement age of 80 instead of 60. And it's all because dollars are losing value at a record pace. The challenge is finding a way to hold on to your dollar while still getting ahead. That's where River Bitcoin comes in. River Bitcoin's interest on cash protects your dollars with FDIC insurance while offering you the option to reap the potential gains of Bitcoin. Over the last 2 years, you would have earned 2 times the rate of the most high-yield savings accounts and 16 times the rate on the national average savings account with Bitcoin interest on cash. Get started, badlandsmedia.tv/river. That's badlandsmedia.tv/river. Thank you to our friends at River. I'm going to do the ASMR thing of filling my strange coffee mug. Some of you probably hate it, but some of you love it. There we go. Going to settle in here with a nice little cup of coffee. I don't get the ASMR thing, by the way. I'm making fun of it. When I found out that close friends of mine go to sleep with strangers whispering in their ear, it creeped me out. It creeped me out. I don't like it. I don't like the ASMR thing. So, but there's like 3 people listening to this show that just fell asleep because I did that. So that was for them, I guess. And for the rest of you, I apologize. You all know I get weird at this time of night. Got an infant. We took our boy out to an Italian restaurant today, 12 weeks old, and he was awesome. We had to feel like real people. So we went to a restaurant. We brought the stroller in, set him next to our table. Maybe got a couple drinks, you know what I'm saying? Mama needs her espresso martinis. But yeah, it was good stuff. It's good to feel like real people. Weather's starting to slowly turn in New England. Of course, we're in the midst of fake summer, which is April, and that's just going to be cold and wet. But the promise of real summer is around the corner. So we're looking forward to that. What else do I have to talk about? Do I want to hit you guys with anything else? Of course, I'm like, oh, this is a short show, and it's almost 2 hours. Couple little narratives that I'll hit on my own, I guess, and then I'll get to you guys with your boosts and rants. One, I use Zero Hedge because they're just a great aggregator. You guys probably saw this. Follow the money. One of my favorite narratives going on recently. Follow the money. Ex Wall Street Journal journalist reveals 24 organizations funding Tesla takedown madness. The Tesla takedown thing is pretty funny. I think it's real, quote unquote. There are people lighting Teslas on fire and doing retarded stuff with Teslas. But I also think it's being vastly boosted. Excuse me, once. Man, usually I have a co-host. I've got a tickle in the throat. So this is a bicameral deployment. It's actual and narrative. The actual, there are crazy lunatics burning Teslas, keying Teslas, etc., right? It also seems like there are NGOs or groups, shadow groups, funding that. That article was about, some independent journalists who are finding there's something like 24 organizations that are directly funding these things. You guys have probably heard me say in the past on this show and various shows, I think the most mimetic narratives in the info war have 3 aspects to them. And I think you should take this as a cognitive cipher that you can start applying to the war of stories. Okay, so aspect number 1, they are strange. Something that is a big story that is very strange is going to get more attention, right? But it's going to fade pretty quick. Number 2, they are scary. Something scary, scare events get a lot of attention, right? Like wars breaking out, an earthquake hits Myanmar or whatever. Scary gets attention. If it's funny, it also gets attention. Meme culture on the internet started via humor. It started via dark humor that bubbled up into the normie sphere. A lot of us savages were on the chans in the dark ages, 15, 20 years ago now. And only the most vanilla memes kind of floated up into the normie sphere. Many people who first heard or used the word meme were probably doing so on Facebook, and it was probably funny stuff, right? But then in the last 10 years, the funny stuff started turning into educational stuff. So strange, scary, funny. Each one of those is going to get a certain amount of play in the collective mind. 2 of those is going to get more play. 3 of those is going to get maximum play. The Tesla narrative is strange because you've all seen the stories of retarded liberals screaming at inanimate objects because of their political views, right? It's scary because you've got domestic terrorists, literally, firebombing car dealerships or people because of what they're driving. And it's a little funny because you're seeing retards screeching, not just at Teslas, but at the very manufacturer, as I predicted 2 years ago, that used to represent their side of the zeitgeist. So that, my friends, is a perfect info war narrative. It is strange, it is scary, and it's funny. And those are going to get the most play. And I think that these things can be real, quote unquote. They can also be boosted for maximum effect. Shout out to Tim Waltz for kind of boosting the narrative even more. I think he did nothing but help make it even funnier and stranger. So that's a good one to watch. And hey, if Tesla firebombings is what starts to get people down the pathway to, man, what's an NGO? And then that allows them to reverse engineer it to, well, maybe this has something to do with why Elon Musk looked at USAID and why Donald Trump vested him with that authority, right? You start to think of things in the war of stories refrain, and you start to be able to put it all together in a way that either makes you correct or absolutely crazy. And if you're crazy, then you're welcome here. The other little narrative was a 2-piece header that I saw. I can't get out of here without talking about a little bit of Russia stuff. Back-to-back headlines. Again, these were zero hedge. Kremlin blasts EU for not wanting peace as it refuses to ease sanctions. We've seen this kind of stuff before. And then this one. Trump, quote, very angry and pissed off at Putin, threatens new tariffs. And this was supposedly a Trump quote. I was very angry, pissed off. when Putin started getting into Ukrainian President Zelensky's credibility and started talking about new leadership in Ukraine, Trump told NBC's Kristen Welker in a phone call. This is another scenario where the first scenario, the A narrative here, is about the EU. I've been writing about that a lot for anybody that follows my Substack. The big exposure that we're seeing right now is the EU. It's the globalist West. We're slowly, steadily moving the collective mind into a battle space where Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump are agreeing on not wanting war to perpetuate, while the EU and Western globalists do everything in their power to keep the war going. Very simple, but very effective. The B side there is Trump talking about how pissed he is at Putin for what he's saying, right? Do I believe he said those comments? Sure. But if I go back 3 years now, this month actually, Righteous Russia Part 4, The Death of War, I didn't just say everything was going to be sunshine and rainbows when I laid forth that prediction of the peacemakers and the narrative of the peacemakers being the major storyline, like probably the major storyline of the info war in the years ahead. I specifically said that Trump and Putin were going to seem like they were on the brink of war or conflict, or they weren't getting along, etc. You might use the word kayfabe if you want. That's going to make the story that much more effective. They're not just going to be friends the whole time. One of the quotes I'd had in that article that was a lot of people's favorite in that series was, Donald Trump is not a man who sues for peace. He will not beg for peace. He will have it, and Vladimir Putin will share in it. So that's how the story is going to be translated to the collective American mind, right? And the global mind. It's not going to be these two chums got together at the table and put a deal together. It's going to be two titans leading superpowers with their sovereign peoples behind them, reached an agreement after a lot of tension in the interim. And I think most of that tension is going to be sparked by NATO, by the EU, by Western globalists, and yes, by Ukraine and Zelensky. Something I didn't get into with Captain Keschel on a specific level, I thought was wiser to do it in a broad level. Sure, a lot of you guys saw the stuff about, Scott Pressler blowing up over the past few days. I don't follow him. I don't really engage with a lot of that kind of stuff. But I know that they talked about it Saturday. I think we mentioned it last Wednesday. It's not to single him out in particular. It's more that persuasion of influencer. There is a macro narrative developing here that I'm very encouraged by, even though getting here has been very frustrating. I believe that this started in December, I want to say, with the Tenet Media scandal, if any of you remember that, where supposedly Russian media outlets were funding Con Inc. influencers, or they don't call themselves that, right? We're funding Tenet Media, etc. We've had the Daily Wire, we've had Fox News. We're now finding out that Tucker Carlson's very independent podcast may or may not have a lot of funding. And then it comes back around and we're seeing many of the big time influencers that were very quick to turn on Donald Trump during the DeSantis op, which Chris, again, has talked about more than anybody. John has signal boosted this a ton going back a couple of years now. These are the people that some of the audience gets on us the most for talking about. And we're never going to stop, because on a long enough timeline, when somebody shows you who they are, believe them. So when you've got these big time influencers passing themselves off as messiahs, messianic figures, tragic figures, all this kind of stuff, while perpetuating the very system that we're trying to reform, that should be a clue to you. But more so, the idea that, as I've said this in my writing in a more esoteric manner, in human history, it's never been the enemies in the hills. It's never been the wolves in the hills that have inspired stories that you tell the children to not scare them, but to warn them about the world. It's never that, right? Fairy tales and speaking of narrative, storytelling is never about corporeal, obvious threats. Those are easy. We call those in writing external threats, right? It's never about external threats. It's always about the wolves in the house, the wolves behind the walls, the people you can't trust, the ones who are acting like your friends but who are not. I'm not pretending that I know everybody who's your friend and everybody who's not. You have to make these determinations for yourself. But what we push back on a lot, and what I push back on a lot, is the idea that casting suspicion or having a suspicious mind onto certain people in this quote-unquote movement is affecting unity. I don't want to be unified with the people that are wheeling the Trojan horse in through the gates. And Chris Paul made this analogy a few weeks ago, right? Like the way paraphrasing, the way he basically put it was, were the people, if somebody knew that there could be a threat to bringing in the Trojan horse, are you going to cast aspersions on those people? Are you going to call them doomers? Are you going to say they're anti-unity? There's a reason we're worried about stuff like that. It's because it's the threat. The irony here is, to put a white pill on this, we're in a battle space right now where the controversy in MAGA and in the truth community is basically about the wolves in the house, who is or isn't a wolf, who we can and can't trust, who's real MAGA, who's not. And I know people get tired of that. That's a good battle space for us to be in compared to what we were in a few years ago, or even last year, when we're worrying about whether or not there's going to be a real election, the Biden regime going back even further, the Clinton regime, the Obama regime, etc. Right? Like we're in a good spot if we're trying to do house cleaning. But what I've been trying to forward lately is you got to do the house cleaning, and you got to not stop and you got to not stand in people's ways when they're doing the house cleaning. So, just my 2 cents on that. Speaking of wolves, before I get to boosts and rants, the movie for Tuesday night is, I've been rewatching this in preparation for the show. It was my selection this week. Honestly, guys, this is, I think, one of the most underrated American films of all time. This is 2011's The Grey, speaking of wolves, starring Liam Neeson. It is about a plane crash in the Alaskan wilderness in which Liam Neeson plays a hunter, a guardian, him and a bunch of guys trying to survive in the wilds while being hunted by a pack of wolves. The marketing for this movie was all about Liam Neeson fights wolves in the woods. That is not what this movie is about. Directed by Joe Carnahan, partially written by him. This is one of the better scripts in recent history. I know this was 14 years ago now. Oh my God. But this is an incredible movie. And, I know that Story Hour is never going to get the same attention that like a lot of the political stuff gets that we analyze around these parts. I know a lot of you guys are into that more. But there's a reason that Chris and I are so focused on storytelling. It's important. It's a big part of how we define ourselves and define what we're doing, morality, etc. And that's a great one. If you want to watch something that's really a treatise on faith in situations where that is very difficult to have, that's a great movie. Death, reconciliation, etc. Not a light watch, but a necessary one, I would say. So join us Tuesday night for The Grey. Thank you guys for watching this show. Please hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed Seth Keshel. I don't know if people like me doing, solo stuff afterwards, but let me know if you do. Otherwise, I could just get out of here once the guest leaves. But appreciate your support. If you are not already booked, Gart Plymouth is coming up in just over 1 month. There are tickets available. I think they are like half the price of Las Vegas tickets for obvious reasons, because it's not Las Vegas. So, Great American Restoration Tour 8, Plymouth, Mass, May 1st to the 4th. Come hang out. Me, John, Chris, Zach, G-Money, Jordan, CanCon, Matthew Arrett, Alpha Warrior, Absolute, Stormy, Ash, and Ghost. Go to badlandsmedia.tv/events. Grab a ticket. Come chill with us. All right. Boost, Facts Not Wishes sent $20 over and said, there's no good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Moral relativism, BB, no. Please dig deeper. Ayn Rand taught that essence is epistemological, not metaphysical. Shakespeare solved the problem of universals before Rand did. Epistemology, not ethics. That's it. I understand what you're saying. It's an interesting interpretation of the line. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong necessarily. The character in that scene, in my opinion, was espousing moral relativism, or the human condition. You can interpret it multiple ways, but hey, there's like 5 people who like the solo, so that's good. Just good to know. So yeah, I mean, appreciate the feedback. Butters, $34. Great show. Thank you both. But Rumi, beyond the ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there's a field. I'll meet you there. Shakespeare was absolutely right. What if we learn to transcend the mind, time, and live in the present beyond duality? Yeah, I mean, Shakespeare was right about his observations about the nature of reality. What I'm interested in is what were the narrative intentions of the writer, because this is something that I don't think a lot of people get. One of the things that I've said before is one of the Q drops that I don't agree with a lot of the interpretations of is the quote unquote, these people are stupid. I get it. I'll go bicameral. On the one hand, I get it. A lot of dumb people in the deep state, a lot of paper pushers, a lot of systemic retards. They've been winning for a long time. They underestimated patriots. They underestimated ghosts. They underestimated us. I think that's true. I think the media are idiots. We've seen that, right? There's a reason they don't invite people like us onto these shows. We'd wreck them. Everybody in this audience would absolutely wreck these people. But you don't build a centuries-long Sumerian death cult that takes over everything that we've ever known by being stupid. You do it because you have a really clear understanding of reality, of how it functions, of how people think, of, going to the title of this show, this episode, consensus protocols and how they are formed. The enemy has long understood the power of narratives, of consensus, of storytelling. We, quote unquote, have only recently started pushing into that direction. And it's something we need to keep pushing in the direction of. It is not about 4-year elections. It is not about who the president is, even though that's important. What everybody needs to keep in mind, which is why I love that movie, The Gray, is that at the end of the world, it's just going to be you. I just had my son born. It's making me reframe everything, right? As many of you with children know, and I love him more than anything in my whole life. But it's going to be between him and God, right? Like at the end of his life, it's going to be just him and it's going to be God. And at the end of my life, it's going to be just me and God. And the people I love are going to be in my head and in my heart. But, you know, I think sometimes we get so focused, like what's going on with elections? I do it too, right? What's going on with how we stop the deep state? That stuff's important. But what are you doing in your mind, in your heart, in your soul to grow, to confront what's in yourself, to evolve, right? It's not just about your mentality. It's not just about the information that you hold. It's about these bigger picture things. It's about what is the nature of your world? What is the nature of reality? What is the nature of morality? How do you want to remember yourself? It's not about other people. I'm not making a solipsist, selfish argument. I'm just saying at the end of it, it's going to be you. It's going to be you alone. And that's not a doomer take. It's to say, how do you want to have spent your time when you look back on it? It's got to be about meaning, about creating meaning. And that meaning can be vested in your family and vested in your children. But did you tell your children that your principles were built around winning elections? Even if they're real elections. Hey, I voted for the right people every 4 years. That's what Dad brought to you, little buddy. I just, no matter how many times people told me to vote for that other blue person, I voted for the red person because your dad's a good guy. Or is he going to remember the hard times, the lessons, how you get back up when you get knocked down, all these cliches? If your kids come to you and ask you about the nature of reality, you don't have to give them the right answer, but you got to be able to talk about it. And if you haven't thought about it, you're not going to be able to talk about it, right? And again, one of the best things I love about hanging out with you guys at Guard is most people do have these kind of conversations in this community. So I just like doing it on the shows. One of the reasons I love doing the show with Chris on Tuesday nights is that's what half our episodes end up being. Don't know how we got on that. Butters sent a $17 boost. Addendum, I'm in the beginning, there was the memory. BB looked no further than baby BB to see the human being versus human doing. As per E-Toll, Power of Now, using the cross metaphor, V-axis is being in presence, and H-axis is doing and thinking. That's pretty funny, given what I just was talking about. Thank you very much. If you guys watch this on replay and you want to send anything over that I'll read next week, go to badlandsmedia.tv. You can click on Boost and select the narrative. So, AirPods fry my brain. I bet they do. I bet you're right about that. I'm not gonna belittle it, but I hate having the wired headphones over my head. Plus, I've been punched so many times and kicked in the face so many times that I think that maybe the 5G waves are rebalancing a lot of the stuff that was knocked out of me during my fighting days. So that's just how I choose to think about it. You're welcome to your own opinion, though. Oh, another boost? Another boost came through? Micro Toolmaker, I got an email for your boost. I did ask the team to set me up with emails because sometimes if you guys send a boost over during the show, it won't update. This one did, though, Micro Toolmaker, who sent $77 over for the show and said, love you, BB. Where we go on, we go all. Thank you so much. Thank you for generously supporting the shows like you do. I said earlier about the Substack with Captain Keschel. We love it. You guys rant and boost. The boosts are really helpful, too, because we don't have as many middlemen there as we do in other platforms. But it's incredibly appreciated. Things are tough right now economically, I think, for a lot of people, despite being the beginning of the golden age. It's going to be tough, I think, for a little while. The stuff, I'll close with my latest Substack article, but the stuff I've been thinking and writing about the most recently is the financial stuff, because I find it's the most interesting Gordian knot for Trump to untangle. And I think he's got a really interesting plan that I don't think I fully understand, but I am trying to understand it. And you guys might like that article if you are in the mood to try to understand it. And but before I get to that, the rants, Tom Terrific sent $25 over. I think there will be a big week ahead for us. Here's a little something for the cause. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate that. Ghost Smith, what? Mrs. BB never watched the OG Karate Kid, but watched Cobra Kai? Yes. Yeah. It's kind of funny watching her watch the original Karate Kid. We got like halfway through it tonight. I was carrying my son around because he doesn't like staying still. Unfortunately, he's like me. So I was carrying him around while kickboxing with my German Shepherd, because if I stand up, the German Shepherd stands up. So Mrs. Bright's trying to watch Karate Kid at my instructions through a wall of me and the baby and the dog all fighting with each other in various ways. But that's the vibe. Cobra Kai, if you guys are looking for like a wholesome show that's not globalist, that's not modern, Cobra Kai is some good shit. And in terms of a legacy reboot sequel to something in the 80s, it does the best job of paying homage to the original stories without making everything super gay and modern. So I would highly recommend it. It's also it's a guilty pleasure show. It's ridiculous. It's about karate dojos going to war with each other. Having been in the karate dojo war environment, I can tell you that while there were never any mall fights between me and rival dojos, there were dojo fights. The worst I ever got hurt in a fight was not in the ring. I had 34 full contact fights in the ring. The worst I ever got hurt, and the reason my nose is not straight, was in a dojo fight where my Shihan put me up against the best guy from a rival dojo that our dojo had split off from. And it was a rough fight. No sanctioning, no referees. We thought we were just there to spar. for our master's honor, and then we ended up just beating the ever-living hell out of each other. Yeah, and you're going to see that in Cobra Kai. So that's what I plan to raise my kids on. Dojo fights and Cobra Kai. Love My Life Today said, Trump's only been in office for 69 days. It's going to take some time. He's getting shit done. Thank you very much for that. Melindy says, BB, here's a new branch of an established non-mainstream publisher that might be interested in your writing, Imperium Press. Thank you very much, Melindy, for sending that over. I am not interested in publishers anymore. My publisher of my work is, they're good guys. My story in the publishing industry isn't one of like getting screwed on a deal. I got screwed by some people I knew, those motherfuckers. But I think things turned out okay for me, and not for many of them. But my publisher was good. It's just that I'm taking my rights back slowly, and that requires money to do. I have something to announce pretty soon that we'll see if you guys like it. Speaking of stories, it's a fun one. I've gotten the rights back to one of my series, and I plan to re-release it under the Burning Bright name. Just working on untangling the rights and, man, trying to convince Amazon and Audible that you own the rights that your publisher is telling them that you own is astoundingly difficult to do. So that's what we're in the midst of doing. And I'm going to put a cool thing together that if you guys want to support it, you can support it. But something that I'm going to produce myself. I'm going to take all the financial risk with it. And, we'll see how it goes. But then I get the reward for it, right? And it's about owning those stories. I don't want anybody owning my stories anymore. And that's a lesson that I have definitely learned and would pass on to other people. Don't let people own your stories. They own a little piece of yourself when they own the story. Melindy, it's not a paywall, peeps. It's a contribution to the cause. Thank you. Love My Life Today. I support you. Battle. Keep up the good work. Thank you. Sherry Amy says thank you. Thank you for the rant. Renew, $10. Thank you, Seth, for what you do. Blessings to you and your family. Yeah, thanks to Seth for coming on the show. Thank you for supporting us. Mrs. Real Freedom Fighter says, great show. Thank you. Thank you indeed. Much appreciated. IIS2C sends $20 over. Great show. 2 great Patriots. Much appreciated. I should be more professional about this show and figure out my guests far in advance, but honestly, I usually figure it out like a couple days before, if that. So, I don't know. If you guys have anybody to suggest, I've been burned by people in terms of like, I trusted Seth because other people trust Seth, but I don't want to just start throwing people willy-nilly onto the show. They might turn out to be huge faggots down the line, in my personal experience. It has nothing to do with being gay. It's just being faggy. Kitty Kubiak, thank you for idea of vote ID. Thanks for Seth. Espresso martini sounds great. Yeah, Mrs. Bright, the espresso martinis. She hadn't had one in like a year. And once she gets going on them espresso martinis, I was there to supervise. Everything was good, all under supervision. And yeah, vote ID. I am positive other people have had that idea. I'm just saying, like, it's an example of a really simple idea. Like, when you go to a deli and order, like, hey, can I have half a pound of turkey sliced thin or something? And they're like, sure, take a ticket. The deli, guys, the deli at your local supermarket has more transparency in the voter roll than United States elections. Okay? It is more verifiable that you were the one who ordered that half a pound of turkey than it is that Donald Trump won the 2024 election. I'm just telling you. Technically, that is true. You're gonna wake up in a cold, turkey-laden sweat thinking about that. Every time you pass through the gaudy light fixtures in supermarkets that are designed to make you depressed about your life, and you walk by those old ladies who take like 4 tickets because they're trying to corrupt this. I'm not saying it can't be corrupted, all right? or the guy who doesn't take a ticket and just walks up to the counter. That's me. I don't take tickets. I'm just telling you, you're supposed to take a ticket. And when you do, you're going to understand that our republic is less verifiable than your Turkey. Also recently got food poisoning as a direct result of deli turkey, Mrs. Bright and I. So, tells you a little something about us. What else do we got here? Julie JN says, thank you for all you do. Good show. Glad you got to go out with Baby Bright. Happy for you and your wife. Thank you very much, Julie. I want to make sure the show is still working, because I don't know if it was still working, but it seems like it is. We're almost out of here. Kitty Kubiak just sent another buck over. Radiant Seas. Blessed Sunday, Burning Bright, and all the obvious reason of why our USA is in this ridiculous voting without ID shenanigans is because it's compromised. Republicans and rhinos allowing the scam to go on. Yeah, I mean, pretty much. Makes perfect sense. Melindy, along the elections narrative, here is Jovan's latest. Jovan, forget his full name, sent another link over. Thanks. Yeah, I've never talked to Jovan, but I know he's been doing a lot of election work for a long time. Professor Dave, $50. Great show with Seth. Thank you, Professor Dave. Appreciate the boost. Quite generous of you. And ZBM, would you ever react to a John Wayne movie, The Cowboys? Really great movie. Maybe. It's not the type of movie I probably wouldn't like it that much, just to be honest, but you never know. I'm always willing to give something a shot. The chat, the reason I was looking at to see if the stream was still working is that the chat appears to be broken right now. So if you guys are chatting, I cannot see you. But either way, thanks for stopping in. Patty, Joe, did you win the dojo fight? I did. It's a fight I won, but didn't feel great about. I won a decision, and this was a fight where it was supposed to be under tournament rules, but it really was my senseis and the opponent's senseis kind of deciding who won the fight. And in my defense, we were wearing padding under our gis, right? So you have gi pants on, and then you wear instep padding over your instep and over your top of your foot. Now, contrary to popular belief, the padding that fighters wear is not usually for them. A lot of it is for the opponent. The chat is fixed. Looks like chat's back. And instep padding, I guess when you're first starting out, like your insteps aren't strong enough. So if you hit something really hard, you're going to break your leg or just like be a little bitch and be hurt about it. But after a while, it's to protect your sparring partners. Because if you get hit with shin bone to the head, getting kicked is many, many orders of magnitude more painful than being punched by a professional puncher. Getting kicked by a professional kicker is unbelievable. If you've never felt it, I do not recommend it. And what happened in that fight is that at the very end of the fight, fair play to my opponent, he had patterned me. He was throwing a lot of jab crosses, and I was ducking the cross. And on the last exchange, he threw a cross, I ducked it, and he threw a right roundhouse kick straight into the bridge of my nose that I leaned fully into. And it dropped me. I got back up, finished the last 10, 15 seconds of the fight, won the fight. But I did get knocked down. Didn't remember the fight. Didn't remember most of the night. Found out that he was not wearing insteps, and I was. So that's my little bitch kind of excuse of why I got dropped. I got hit with pure shin bone when I had made a lot of contact to his head and I was wearing pads. So I do have footage of what happens when I hit somebody without pads on. And maybe someday I'll share that at a GART. Valesco, 16. Get Dave or LT. You'd be a legend. Dave X22, you mean? LT and we know. I never watched that show, but I know they give shout outs every once in a while. Yeah, Dave, word for word, reposted I shouldn't say reposted. I call everybody out when I see it. somebody running the X22 account, word for word, took Jordan Sather's tweet today and reposted it under his account. I like Dave from X22 very much. I know that's how a lot of people find a lot of different people. I think he's doing great work. I think somebody else is running his Twitter feed or his True Social feed. I'm just telling you. Jordan's probably not going to say that publicly, so I'll fall on the sword for him. Just saying, you know, like there's you guys have seen me rant about it before. I'm never going to apologize for it. I come from the publishing industry. Do not appreciate idea theft. Do not appreciate people passing off ideas as their own when they are not. I try to always be honest about where I got an idea. Even earlier, I started talking about the Trojan horse analogy and then remembered that Chris had been talking about that 2 weeks ago, which is probably why I thought of it. So then I said that, right? It's really simple to just be like, oh, let me just retweet this. It's not cool. And there's a whole cottage industry built around it right now. So there's a reason those people won't be coming to our events very much, I would guess, because I'm not the type of person that doesn't say anything about stuff like that, as you guys know. And it turns out when people are confronted in person, they usually turn into little bitches about this kind of stuff. Not talking about X22, by the way. Don't have to be a genius. Blue 7i, God bless you. BB, Mrs. BB, and Baby BB. Wish I could go to Plymouth. Yeah, thanks for the blessings. And looking forward to seeing whoever comes to Plymouth. It should be a fun one. Valesco said, talk to John. He'll inform you how to pronounce my handle. Valseco. Okay. Maybe it's some dyslexia going on. But yeah. And guys, I've been credited on X22, and I know people have told me I've been credited on And We Know. I wasn't talking about myself. I was talking about somebody else. The reason I'm confident enough to say the X22 thing is because I genuinely don't believe it's him. I think that he's a good guy and has been doing this for a long time and brought a ton of people to John's research and to many, many good researchers. But there are people who, you know, get really big and they outsource stuff, right? Like Chris used to talk about this in Hollywood. People outsource their social media game. When you do that, it's going to happen at times, right? Like you're going to get somebody that's like, oh, I saw this cool thing. I think I will copy and paste it over onto my feed. And I know people there's some people in this audience who are like, just take the win, right? Like it's very laughable to somebody who came from the publishing industry because like, if you just copy my fucking book over and you republish it and you're like, oh, what's it matter, man? It's just, I'm just trying to boost your story to other people while sort of implying that I came up with it. See how it's a little different? Like, but in the info war, somebody comes up with a very specific way to frame something. If you say like Trump good and somebody else says Trump good, then you're not being plagiarized. But when you write an article about the 3-act structure of the story of Donald Trump, and then a week later, somebody does a whole show on it, it's just, these things are a little bit silly. Or when people use Chris's, you sound vaccinated. Like, we were all there when he made it up, right? Just say where you got it. But anyway, yeah, a lot of people found John through X22. And like I said, I've seen him feature myself as well. Probably stepped in a hornet's nest. Is what it is. Don't really care anymore. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. Please hit the thumbs up button. Helps us get up on the leaderboard. Helps people find it on Mondays. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed it. Follow Seth Keschel. I was going to say, if you guys want to, it's everything I do over there is free. You can support it financially if you want to. My newest article is 7,000 words. I apologize. It is what it is. It's called Reality Wars, Winning the Game by Breaking It. Go to burningbright.substack.com. Spend some time on this one. This one is all about the Dogening. It's all about some convergences between the switch theory, Howard Lutnick, Scott Bessent, tariffs, the US dollar, Bitcoin, even though that hurts people's feelings, all kinds of stuff. And I think I'm at the very beginning stages of having a very small idea about little pieces of what patriots are trying to do this year. Or not. But you can check that out, burningbright.substack.com. And otherwise, the war is a story. The story is a war. Act accordingly. See you next week.
We were sleeping. I've been sleeping. I've been turning away from a truth I wanted not to face. There is a wound that won't heal at the center of the galaxy. There is a darkness reaching like rust into everything around us. We let it grow, and now it's here.
How many men have you killed, Malone?
I don't know.
50? 100? Countless.
Countless has a nice ring to it.
And how many lives have you saved?
500,000. Population of King's Landing. Tell me if your precious Randy commanded you to kill your own father and stand by while thousands of men, women, children burned alive, would you have done it? Would you have kept your oath then?
Our time has come. We prepared. We grew stronger. Were you rested in your cradle of power? You were trusted to lead the Republic. But you were deceived. You assumed no force could challenge you. Now, finally, we have returned.
The visions are clear now. I see possible futures all at once. Our enemies are all around us. And in so many futures they prevail. But I do see a way. There is a narrow way through.
It's not a prophecy. It's a story that you keep telling, but it's not their story, it's yours. They deserve to be led by one of their own. What your people did to this world is heartbreaking.
We gave them something to hope for.
That's not hope!
We have survived by hiding from them, by running from them. But they are the gatekeepers. They are guarding all the doors, they are holding all the keys, which means that sooner or later, someone is going to have to fight them.
I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such time, but that doesn't belong for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us.
Forgive me. I did not see. I have failed you all.
You will bring me. John, I do not know what strength is in my light. I swear to you, I will not let the light city fall. Our people fail. Our people. Our people.
I wish you good fortune in the wars to come. And now it begins.
No. Now it ends.